have the Ayatollah of fantasy rock and roller with us today, Adam Rank. How you doing, Rank?
They look great in person, and I just can't wait till next year where we can pack it full of 25,000.
Hey, Bob, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Ball Guys Day. It was being ranked. I mean, how can you lose?
This is the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast.
Hello and welcome to the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast. Joining me today, as always, Tara Roberts and Major Caldwell. Now, when we talk about the National Football League, we know that consistency is key. You cannot have a bad week or else you're going to drop an L in the column there and find yourself on the outside looking in come playoff time. Well, the same can be said when it comes to fantasy football. And when you're talking about fantasy football consistency, the conversation needs to begin and end with Mr. Bob Long. How you doing today, Bob?
Doing great. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. No, too kind. Very too kind. Thank you for having me. As always love coming on the Dynasty Vipers. And so, yeah, I'm excited that we're going to talk about the consistency guide that's out there on Amazon and share some of that knowledge. And then hope everybody go out and start using a little bit more in their draft prep.
Yeah, we're going to talk about players that you can trust, players that can be busting, and guys that we're probably sleeping on. We're also going to talk about that 2023 Fantasy Football Expo down in Canton, Ohio. I believe that's August 11th to the 13th this season, and you do not want to miss this. From fantasy football analysts to the casual fan, there is something there for everybody, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show because I make the trip the last 3 years at least, down from my little nest here in the Rocky Mountains, the Canadian Rocky Mountains, all the way across to Canton, Ohio. And there's nothing I would rather do than spend my time with Bob Long and his crew. I mean, you and your family put so much work into that each and every year, making sure your guests are comfortable. I mean, I can't think of a better, you can bring your family. I literally brought my wife last year, who's not a big football person there. And she was able to enjoy herself somewhat. I mean, I use that word kind of casually because it wasn't her thing, but she was still able to go out there and enjoy it. I mean, if you like those small, little big town, I guess, what's the best way to even describe Canton?
It's small. It's small town, Midwest USA. It's perfect. Everything's 10 minutes from each other. You know, if there's a traffic jam, you just go around both the cars and move on. It's easy.
We're going to hope to clog things up this year because I'm hoping to have like a Waffle House draft like 2 o'clock in the morning there and see what kind of transpires out of that. But when we talk about publications and consistency, we have to talk about the Fantasy Football Guide. We're talking about nominated, not just 6 times. It's been nominated 6 times, but 6 years in a row, winning it all back in 2018. That's right, 2017, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, and you're darn well going to believe it's going to be there in 2023 as well. So and we've got in 2023, you've got the consistency forecaster kind of thrown in there too. You got some new little wrinkles into this whole magazine. What is new in the consistency guide here for 2023 that you can purchase on Amazon right now?
Right. Get it on Amazon. And if you're a Prime member, you should get it in 2 days. Yeah, it's just, it's very much the same. Hey, from year to year, it's very consistent. Let's be honest. It gives you the data that you need to know. And many, many people who are struggling out there. And you may, one of your listeners may be one of those people. Hey, I make the top 6 every year in scoring, but half the time I barely make the playoffs. What's going on? Probably inconsistency of your players. You're drafting guys who are top 10, top 20 in scoring, but they're 50% consistent. So one week they're helping you, next week they're not. And that's not a good way to make the playoffs. And a lot of times that's what happens. That's how I created this thing. Was I had a year that I was second in scoring and I was 7-7 in the regular season, didn't make the playoffs. And I created this from here because I was like, wait a minute, something's going wrong. And I figured it out. And now it helps me and helps so many others get to that point.
So when you talk about developing that consistency guide, like you mentioned that you needed to find some consistency. How do you crunch these numbers? How do you determine who's consistent, who's not consistent? Because I like to try and run my own projections. And I'm not going to lie, there's people that do projections with all kinds of weird Excel formulas and what have you not. That's not really my style there. But when you develop consistency, you're looking at certain metrics that are going to project well for these fantasy football players and what's going to happen for them here. What are some of the main categories that you're looking at when you formulate this all?
Well, basically, it's some factors have come into play: number of teams in your league, the scoring method itself, and then basically it just kind of calculates what I call a clutch factor or the consistency factor, and then that is how many points does that position player have to score in a given week to earn over what is considered the starting lineup. So 12 quarterbacks, 24 running backs, 36 receivers, and then 12 tight ends in a typical league. Obviously, you can edit the scoring on the website. There's a tool there called the consistency report. If you're in a 14-team league or you play with different scoring methods, you can adjust it to what you need to adjust. But the stuff we'll talk about, stuff that's in the guys, your traditional 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 3 receivers, tight end, no flexes, and but if you can always rearrange that in a PPR scoring. So it just calculates that. Typically for wide receivers and running backs, it's over 11 points a game. Quarterbacks is over 20, and tight ends are over around 8 traditionally.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds really good, and I'm all the way with you. I think I found a mistake already. You have Josh Allen as your number 1 quarterback. Talk to us about that. I don't know if Josh Allen is the most consistent when we have Patrick Mahomes still in the league. Talk to me about that, Bob.
Well, as they always say, numbers don't lie. Josh Allen last year, 94%, Patrick Mahomes, 88%. Actually, Allen missed 1 game, which if he had scored his typical 20-23 fantasy points, he would have been ahead of Mahomes in total points as well. So they're neck and neck. I'm not going to split hairs. If you're a Patrick Mahomes guy over Josh Allen at number as your first quarterback, you have no argument for me whatsoever. They're definitely 1-2 right there. So yeah, I'm all for it. But yeah, Allen was a little more consistent last year by 1 game.
With number 2, Patrick Mahomes. I disagree with Major. I think you've got it right here. But Patrick Mahomes.
Nothing new.
Well, yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, like you said, whether it's Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, they're both great. They're both very consistent. It doesn't seem to matter who's. Mahomes is like Tom Brady used to be. It doesn't matter who's playing wide receiver. Kelsey certainly helps a lot, but doesn't. They lost Tyreek, and everybody went, "Oh, that's it. Patrick Mahomes is done. He's never." And look what he did. He used a bunch of common players, Juju, MVS, those kind of guys, and still ended up first in total points and 88% consistent. So it's hard to argue him at number 2 or number 1, depending on where you're at.
I mean, we've got the Scott Fish Bowl coming here right now. We know that Scott Fish likes to put all kinds of weird twists in there, and a lot of people are jumping in those first 3 draft selections here to get one of these big dogs here at the quarterback position, whether that's Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, or the number 3 guy here on the consistency, who's actually grown quite a bit. When you look at last year's consistency guide to this year's consistency guide, he may be the biggest riser at the quarterback position, and that is Jalen Hurts. What are you seeing from him last year compared to what you're seeing coming into this year?
Well, just everything fell in place. They added A.J. Brown, which helped tremendously, gave them a real number 1 at wide receiver, paired with Devontae Smith, and having Dallas Goedert, which is one of the best tight ends in the league outside the name of Kelsey. That's really what helped him. Good coaching, good offense, great offensive line. He makes good decisions. And of course, his feet give you a lot of fantasy points that his arm does not on occasions. That certainly doesn't hurt as well. And, it wouldn't surprise me if Jalen Hurts ends up number 1 this year. I mean, if he really breaks out and even, continues to improve, he could be the number 1 guy. And that's why those 2 are really going 1, 2, 3 in various orders, depending on who's ranking them.
Right. And I think this is where it gets really interesting here. Like everyone else in the top 5 scored like 80 and up or 80% and up. But then Justin Herbert stuck in there with 53%. How does that work? So explain how he got up in there.
So what you see in the guide is where I have ranked them for this upcoming year.
Okay.
Not exactly that they were, their percentage from the year before. So again, while history is good and consistency definitely takes history into play, it's also that I call expected consistency rating. What do I expect out of them? And just 2 years ago, Mr. Herbert was third in total points and third in consistency at the quarterback position with these same players involved. He played most of the season with damaged ribs, damaged cartilage, all kinds of problems, let alone the fact that his number 1 and number 2 receiver both missed about half the season, and yet he still ended up 8th in total points. Yeah, the consistency wasn't there because the consistency of the health of that team wasn't there. Right. Everybody's healthy. Let's assume that Keenan Allen and Mike Williams can make it through 12, 14 games this year. And he's 100% healthy. Josh is, or not Josh.
Justin.
Yeah. Justin is. So that's why I have him up there, just before Joe Burrow. I know there's a lot of Burrow fans that are probably, taking their voodoo dolls of Bob Lung and stabbing it with a pen. But look, I love Burrow too. And, but I just feel like Herbert and Burrow are right there at that 4 or 5 spot. And that's because he has been there in the past. I expect him to get back there this year.
Did adding,
by the way, he's playing for a $40 million contract, probably.
Right. And then adding another receiver, that young receiver was a Quentin Johnson they got. Like, did that go into any, is that factored in there?
It certainly helped, right? Because we've got a better, if one of those two, because you assume one of them will get hurt. Definitely Quentin Johnson is going to be a lot better than a Jalen Guyton and DeAndre Carter, whatever their stiffs they throw out there.
So next up, Joe Burrow. This one is interesting because, again, we talked about Justin Herbert coming in there before him. Now with Joe Burrow, he's a high volume quarterback, but he does kind of have, I guess he kind of falls into that category of those guys that we're seeing that maybe don't have the upside of their legs. He moves around a little bit. He's mobile. He gets around the pocket, but he doesn't have that rushing upside. So is that why he kind of falls below those other guys who, Herbert did traditionally, when he did have the breakout year, did do a little bit better on the ground? So is that kind of what knocks Joe Burrow down a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think these top 5 could easily, any of them could be first at the end of the year. I mean, if Burrow, let's say Jamar Chase doesn't get hurt. I mean, he missed 5 games last year. If he plays all 17 games, they got a better offensive line, improvement on the offensive line. Joe Mixon, we don't know what's going on there. We assume he's going to play again and assume he's going to be part of the team. But let's be honest, this team revolves around that quarterback and those 3 wide receivers.
Right.
I could easily see, once again, I could easily argue that wouldn't surprise me if Joe Burrow ends up being first in total points and number 1 in consistency this year. So that top 5 is, but that's also the reason that top 5 is being drafted in rounds 1, 2, and 3. And if you don't get them before the end of round 3, maybe early round 4, you're not touching them. Herbert's the only one that's falling outside of that. He's going around 5, 6, which is why he'll probably be on a lot of my teams because I kind of like to wait. But if you want one of those 5, which have all proven their consistency and their talent, you got to pick them a little earlier than you used to. So that's the tough point this year.
Yeah, you look at their numbers last year. I think they were all in the top 8 when it came to consistency and fantasy points last season. When you look at the next tier, we all know that Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields and Lamar Jackson, they're going to have the potential to crack that top 5 when fantasy points are all said and done. But when you look at a sleeper, if you dig a little bit deeper, so I want to ask you who that sleeper pick is, because last year it was probably Geno Smith, who was probably the 5th most consistent quarterback on the board if you look at his numbers from 2022. So one, I want to ask you, who's this year's Geno Smith? Maybe it's Geno Smith, maybe it's Jared Goff again. And then on the other one, when I look at how the expected fantasy points breaks down on here, one of the guys that's a little bit lower than you maybe expect to be a little bit higher, and maybe it's an injury thing with him, but Tua Tagovailoa is a little bit lower down on these rankings. So kind of talk about Tua's ranking on here, why it's a little bit lower, and then who that sleeper is, who's that Geno Smith, Jared Goff, because a lot of us are not going to get one of those top 5 quarterbacks, right, and we may punt the position to a little bit later, and often that hurts us, right? That's going to hurt us. We need to find who that's going to be. So, Bob, your formula, who's that sleeper going to be? Who do we need to get?
Well, just real quick on Tua, it's just really the injury scenario. He scares me to death. Yeah, if you told me, hey, he's completely clear, he has no issues, and he's ready to roll, and I get it. Any quarterback can get hit and have issues, but he just seems like I just don't want to take that chance, and that's the only reason he's down. I just don't think he's going to make it. I hope he does. I hope I'm wrong, but I won't be drafting him. But sleeper wise, So try not to laugh real loud when I say this, but it's Daniel Jones.
Oh
Last
no.
year, hear me out. So last year he was ranked basically top 12 in both consistency and total points. But the last 8 games of the year, he averaged 22.5 fantasy points per game and was 75% consistent. If he can match those numbers for a whole season, he's top 6, top 7, and you can draft him in like round 10, round 8. If you're looking for somebody you want to load up on your wide receivers, your running backs, your tight ends, just lock down that offense. Daniel Jones could be the guy that could help you get that, the consistency you need. He's not going to put up 35 points a week like Mahomes and Allen, but you want that 20 to 25 points a week. That's your guy.
I'm with you. I know that pains Major so much, but that consistency and that solid floor that Daniel Jones has was one of the reasons that I loved him as a huge streaming option and DFS option last year as well. Just because when you look at him and all the tools that he has, it makes sense that he'll be able to take that leap another year with Brian Dable, adding additional weapons. They're just throwing everything they can to find a wide receiver core that will work for them, investing in the draft. So I can see where, he's able to repeat on that last, that final back half of the season success. So I'm with you 100% on that one.
We are, I don't know, Bob, you realize this, but we are a very pro vanilla Vic on this TV show, on this podcast right now.
I
hate the nickname. I think I hate him because of the nickname. It's all Tara and Matt's fault. That's why I do not like Matt. I mean, what's his name? That guy.
Major, you get one. I'll give you one. It's either Vanilla Vic or the Mayo Moon. Okay, you get one or the other. That's it.
No, neither. We got to figure something else out for that kid's nickname because Vanilla Vic is not it. Let's get off these quarterbacks. Let's get into some running backs. But before I talk to you about this first one you have here, is it a different way of ranking each position, or is it kind of like the same formula for each position?
It's the same formula for each position. Obviously, what it does though is that when it's doing the division factor and figuring out that clutch factor, it is calculated only for that position. But like I said, both running backs and wide receivers in a PPR pretty much are around 11 points to kind of earn that clutch game to get you the consistency you're looking for.
Okay, so if we get into our top pick here, we got Christian McCaffrey here. How do you rank him number one when the consistency is not always there with the injury? The injury part, kind of like what you said about Tua, is kind of like that with Christian as well. How do you kind of balance that out to make him number one?
I mean, I guess I have him number one because of what he can do in a football game. I mean, and the fact that he's in San Francisco, he has nobody to compete with. They're certainly going to use him as much as they can. But I would definitely say that if you said to me, well, I would rather pick Austin Eckler first, I'm good. It's kind of like the Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
Those two are just splitting hairs. You probably have a better shot at Eckler playing all 17 games or 16 games versus McCaffrey, but he did play all 17 games last year. Yeah, I mean, again, injuries are injuries. Yeah, we want to say McCaffrey's injury prone, but, he toughed it out last year and, was very successful. The difference this year is that, most of the drafts I've done so far, whether it's best ball or even mocks, you're only seeing 3, maybe 4 running backs going in the first round. So it's just a different scenario. It's not like you have to pick McCaffrey at first overall. You can get McCaffrey number 5 because you can easily see 3 or 4 wide receivers go and Kelsey, and then McCaffrey's available. So it's just definitely a different scenario this year. From what I'm seeing, and I'm assuming it'll continue the rest of the summer. But yeah, it's been interesting.
Yeah. So with the injuries though, like how do you factor that in? Is that just kind of like off of your gut? Like, hey, he may be injured in the past, but I feel like his is not as crucial as like a Tua, like a head injury thing. Like, right. How do you like? How does that equate to all these formulas here?
Yeah, I think it's more of a. If they had significant injuries like an ACL or an Achilles or something that can affect their movement, that's a little bit different. McCaffrey's seems to be back 100%. His has always been like just tweaks here, tweaks there.
Right.
I think he's just extra careful before he comes back. That seems to be the trend versus a ACL tear or a Achilles tear, where you're really going to have to kind of give a little, kind of scale them back a little bit to where they're coming back and where they're going to be.
So Austin Eckler at number 2. I think this one is kind of interesting because everybody knows I'm just, Austin Eckler, number 1 for me in every way.
I'm good with that.
Love PPR. But this one is interesting because while, Austin Eckler has been literally a pillar of consistency, amazing floor, fantastic ceiling, all you could ask for in a running back. We're in this weird situation now where we don't 100% know what direction this offense is going to go. They've obviously, invested in Quentin Johnston. They've got their new offensive coordinator who, while we can look to what Dallas did last year, we know that there was a little bit of a battle there between Kellen Moore and Mike McCarthy. And what we see from Kellen Moore might be starkly different than what we saw him, utilize his players in Dallas. So there's a little bit of unknown with Austin Eckler. Does coaching changes or, changes in potential schemes have any effect on the ranking for you?
I mean, it certainly does in the rankings. I mean, consistency is the numbers. I mean, the numbers are the numbers. But yeah, I mean, I certainly look at, like, for example, a Josh Jacobs who, was 3rd in total points last year, 71% consistent. I don't have as much love for him as I did last year when he was heading into the season, just because of the changes around him and the coaching and the new quarterback. So yeah, I always take that into effect. Austin Eckler's almost coach proof because he's so talented and he's on every play, right? He's going to catch balls out of the backfield. That's his forte. If Kellen Moore is going to be more pass oriented than run oriented, and we're all excited, right? Now Eckler is not going to run the ball as much, but he'll catch 8 passes or 10 passes a game instead of 6 or 8. So I think we're all excited about Eckler from that standpoint with Kellen Moore coming in there.
For sure.
Well, the number 3 back on this list, I mean, a lot of us were excited. He came out gangbuster there last season. And everything was going well for Saquon Barkley. And before I really get diving in here on Saquon Barkley, one of the interesting things is when we look historically back on rookies and that clutch rate. You mentioned Austin Eckler right before, the 94% clutch rate there last season. Well, Saquon Barkley has the best clutch rate there going back to 2018 amongst rookie backs. And spoiler alert, Bijan Robinson's not in the top 5. I'm just going to throw that out there right now. A lot of people have him in their top 5 when it comes to redraft rankings. Now, saying all that, just remember, these are not like the de facto number 1. This is how you have to kind of go with. This is a guide, right? This is about consistency, what's been established, what we know the norm to be right now to kind of guide you through your selections and whatnot. But looking at it like Saquon Barkley, he had the best ever in 2018. Ezekiel Elliott in 2016 had a 93% clutch rate. Le'Veon Bell, 92% clutch rate back in 2013. So those are the guys who cracked 90%. Cracking 90% as a rookie is very difficult to do. So when we don't hear Bijan Robinson's name, maybe we'll talk about him a little bit later.
Sure.
In comparison to a guy like Saquon Barkley, who's been there and done that with the historical best rookie season ever by a running back, coming in at your number 3 spot. Kind of talk about what you see from Saquon Barkley. Can he consist? Like, part of the consistency part is being consistent throughout the season. There was a bit of a tail off towards the back end. Maybe he was being run a little bit too hard. Maybe, he came out too strong there after that ACL injury and then kind of wore down. Do you see that being a problem here in 2023?
No, I think a couple of things with Barkley. Number 1, last year he was playing for a big contract. So guess what? Magically played every one of his games. Oh, I take that back. He missed one. He didn't get the contract. He got tagged, right? So now he's playing again for a contract. You've got a different coach. You've got a better offense now and Brian Dable in there, which I think helped him a lot last year as well because they got Daniel and Jones more involved in the passing game. They better play calling, better scenario, just I think worked well for everybody on that team. And that's why I have him there again this year. I really feel like nothing much has changed. Again, I think they've improved their offensive line, if I'm not mistaken, through the draft as well in free agency. So I think they're going to rely on Barkley more, or just as much as they did last year. And I think that's why I have him ranked that high.
Yeah, I mean, your fourth one here is like somebody I feel is kind of flying under the radar. It was just a couple years ago when this guy was like the number one guy in all of football, and all of a sudden, no one's talking about him anymore. And they have a new young quarterback over there who everyone's like drooling over. So I feel like no one's really talking about Jonathan Taylor. Talk to us about why you put him at 4.
Well, I think I put him at 4 mostly for the fact that I don't think he's going to be I think he's still going to have a tough road this year. Having a rookie quarterback or Gardner Minshew, as we call him, AKA Matt Donnelly's lookalike, playing the quarterback position, it's going to make it tough for Taylor to not get 8 men stacked in that box, right? Which is going to make it hard for him to put up the fantasy points that he did just 2 years ago. And yeah, he did it with, I don't know, who the heck was the quarterback 2 years ago? They changed a lot. Was it Wentz? I think
Matt Ryan, maybe.
They had Wentz there, Ellinger's there, Nick Foles there,
whoever. Yeah.
Everybody.
So I think he's he's flying under the radar, but he's still going early second round. So again, as I was saying, I was on a show the other night and we were talking about Jonathan Taylor, and I said, look, I like Jonathan Taylor. He's definitely one of the most talented young running backs in the league, but when you're drafting those situations, and you're at the end of that first round, and you're looking at guys like AJ Brown or CD Lamb or Jonathan Taylor, would you go with the 80%, 90% consistent wide receivers, or a guy that is going to be good, but you don't know which games he's going to get held in check because the offense can't move at the quarterback position? So right. I like him. I have him 4th. I think it's mostly just because he has that talent. The consistency still may be around the 65, 70% versus 80, 85, but he's so good that he can bust off those 30-point games and have 3 touchdowns and they're in a very poor division with the Texans and and the like. So yeah, that's why I got him at 4.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor is one of those. It's weird because we're almost guaranteed a bounce back year. It can,
right.
With everything that happened, you're going to see that moving forward. But there's so many unknown factors in terms of how the new quarterback and everything is going to affect him. So I think number 4 coming in there, and early round 2 makes sense for him. Number 5, Derrick Henry. I love this because he's one that, especially in redraft, people just kind of tend to struggle with because they're always trying to predict, when is he going to hit that cliff? When are we going to see, the reduction in efficiency? And we've seen it going down a little, but he's still Derrick Henry, and even reduced rate Derrick Henry is still just far and above the vast majority of the league. So, let's talk Derrick Henry at number 5.
Yeah, I think you pretty much said it all for me. He is exactly who he is. When you think he's not going to be still tough enough to power through. He was 4th last year in total points, 75% consistent. Ryan Tannehill will probably still be the quarterback for most of the year. It's a last hurrah for him. I think Henry's going to do his best to go out there and, he gets to play the Texans twice a year. So that's 250 yards rushing in each game and 3 touchdowns. So, those are the games you got to play him. He's just too consistent not to put in that spot. I mean, certainly there's guys like Najee Harris and Nick Chubb and those kind of folks that are close enough. Like, again, I wouldn't argue if somebody said, well, Mike, I'd rather have Najee over him or Chubb over him. Okay. I can't argue that. They're all very close. But boy, if you really need somebody you can rely on, and he's going as RB9 in like round 3.
Wow.
Amazing.
Can I get Jefferson and CD Lamb and then take Derrick Henry? I'm cool with that.
That is an amazing team.
Yeah.
So before we get into sleepers here, when you talk about clutch games, we talk about that clutch rate percentage here, clutch games. I found it very interesting. So first, just kind of let everyone know what a clutch game consists of. What do you have to do to get a clutch game in?
Well, like I said before, it's based on the calculation in the system that's on the Big Guy Fantasy Sports website. But in a traditional PPR scoring, quarterbacks in a 4 touchdown passing is about 20 points to earn a clutch game. Running backs, wide receivers, PPR is around 11, and tight ends are about 8. And if you get over that, you earn a clutch game, more clutch games, more consistent, and that's kind of how it's all calculated out.
Yeah, like at the quarterback position, you said that clutch game at 20 points there. I mean, if we get 18 points out of our quarterback on any given week, we usually feel pretty good about that. What I found interesting is when I dove into this consistency guide, the top 3 clutch games last season at the running back position didn't really shock me. Christian McCaffrey, Saquon Barkley, Austin Eckler. But what did shock me was the other running back there that had 13 clutch games, which was right there with Barkley, with Eckler, and with Christian McCaffrey. And that was Najee Harris, who a lot of people, and I've been put on notice by a lot of people for being high on Harris this season. His offensive line has improved drastically. Isaac Samoa there, the guard out of Philadelphia, who is the one player the Eagles did not want to lose. The big man, Broderick Jones, he should come in and start at left tackle, maybe not right off the get-go, but he should be there right away. The dude was getting 1.71 yards per attempt before contact. Running behind those guys on the left side is going to improve it. So I was really shocked to see that when I looked at it all here. I'm like, oh man, Harris should be a lot higher on a lot of people's lists when they're looking at drafting. Right now, you're getting a probably start of the third is kind of where he's going in a lot of drafts that I've seen, maybe a little bit later. But when we talk about these sleeper running backs, I mean, everyone's already calling the Tony Pollards, the Bryce Youngs, the Ramondre Stevensons. These are guys that we all kind of feel are going to be breakout type players heading into 2023. Who's that breakout player here that I'm looking down the list? Is it Miles Sanders who maybe we're forgetting about? Because he seems like the guy we're always forgetting about. So kind of talk to us about him a little bit, and then talk to us about why you still got Kenneth Walker as high as you do, because a lot of people are actually scared of his situation there with the additional pass catchers there in Seattle, maybe transitioning a little bit more pass heavy, and Zach Charbonnet is no joke in that backfield.
All right, where do you want me to start?
Well, let's go with Miles Sanders because
all right, Miles Sanders. Well, the funny thing was Najee Harris is on my consistent undervalued players in my guide, which would be your sleepers. Najee Harris was number 1 on the list. Number 2 on the list is Miles Sanders. And let me walk you through this scenario because this is how I wrote it up. Last year, he was, remember, let me look. 15th in total points, 23rd consistency. Why was he that low? Not because he didn't rush. He had a lot of yards. He couldn't score any touchdowns because Jalen Hurts steals them all. So if he just keeps his rushing yards that he had last year, and now he's basically the main back in Carolina, and you just add 4 more touchdowns, just add 4 touchdowns. He had like 10 probably stolen away from Jalen Hurts. And he gets, let's add 30 catches because there's nobody else to throw to in Carolina other than a bunch of, average wide receivers. He's going to be at 272 fantasy points in the top 7. That's where he would have ranked. His ADP right now is RB 24, and that's probably being generous because I think it might have been fallen. Let's see, I just updated it. Now up to 23. So yeah, and it's like, and he's going in, 4th round. Again, could be your RB2, but after you load up on wide receiver. So I love Miles Sanders. I think he's a great sleeper this year for sure.
And then just talk about that Kenneth Walker situation there, because I know you're higher on him than most people are. I think a lot of people are scared off by that situation, kind of really pushed him down the rankings. That didn't really seem to affect you much.
No, I really like Kenneth Walker. I mean, again, you look at, he missed a couple games. He was 18th in total points, but he really didn't get started until, middle of the season when they really started letting him loose. But yet he ended the year only two clutch games behind 13, which, so he had 11. So he was just 2 clutch games behind the Najee Harris and the Barkleys and all those folks. And yet we've got him at RB 15. I've got him at RB 8 because he was 9th in consistency last year. And now he's going to get a full season. We all know that, the coach of the Seahawks, I just went brain dead on, Pete Carroll, loves to run the ball. And if he's running the ball well, he's going to use that. I mean, I don't see that changing as long as Pete Carroll is running that team. Yeah, I know they added, JSN, but okay. So, but Walker was running well. They were winning football games. That's what they're all about, and that certainly takes the pressure off Geno Smith to be able to throw those balls and make those completions. And I think that's what they're going to do for the best of the team. And I think Kenneth Walker is a nice 4th round pick. And I'd be happy to get him as our RB2 and 4th round if that's where he falls to, for sure.
There you have it. Bob Lung is talking about Kenneth Walker turning off the lights on a lot of fantasy managers heading into 2023. See what I did there, Tara? I did that one just for you.
Thank you.
Now, what we're not turning the lights off on is the Fantasy Football Expo because, listen, there's no bigger party when it comes to fantasy football. This thing is growing each and every year. What are we on year number 8 now, Bob? Is that accurate? 4?
For number 4.
The King's Classic's older than the actual
King's Classic's only 1 year older. It's going into you're right, it's year 6 for King's Classic.
So we will
Yeah, we
split
all
the
know
difference there.
Matt can't count, so we let him just.
I
go.
thought maybe I thought it was a
Bob, next time disagree with him. 'cause
conversion
he-
rate
you know,
or something.
yeah.
I was missing
That's
out.
exactly what it is. It's the Canadian to the American conversion rate, and then I'm using metric here when I'm trying to make the calculations, and it's getting lost there. So I'm feeling pretty good about myself now. If this is number 4, and I've been to 3 of them, I'm feeling pretty good.
Yeah,
So if I'm coming all the way from the Canadian Rockies all the way down to the Fantasy Football Expo, there's really no excuse for someone from California or someone from Texas not being able to make it to the event. I'm not calling anyone out or anything, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Now, Bob, when we talk about this expo, each and every year, this thing gets bigger and bigger and bigger and better and better and better. So what you have, I mean, we had cornhole going on there. We had the touch football, the flag football, the quarterback competition. We might have to bring some extra doctors out this year when we're talking about some of these events.
Yeah.
I just seen a new sponsor come out for the party there on
Very nice party.
the Saturday party there.
Fantasy Football Advice Forum. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we've got big time things going on. I mean, we've taken this party from inside, outside to like a football stadium, taking over an entire football stadium. What have we got in store here for 2023? Because I know you've always got something else coming down the line every single time.
Oh yeah. So pretty similar. So Friday night party, Centennial Plaza, downtown, cornhole tournament again. I will not be playing this year. I will retire as champion because I don't want to
take it. Okay. I see how we're working.
Retire at the top. Smart move.
Yeah, I'm going to be like Peyton Manning, retire on top. So that's going to happen Friday downtown as always. As you said, Saturday we have the King's Classic drafts and all that stuff will be happening at the Hall of Fame. We will be doing the flag football competition inside the dome this year because the dome is finished. Nice. So that way we don't have to worry about weather. Even though last year was really nice, it was perfect. We love to be in the big stadium. I just cannot take that risk, so I want to keep it inside. But we'll see. You never know. But we're going to do that indoors inside the dome, which is a indoor football field, kind of blow up dome, if you know what I'm talking about. But the cool part is that is also where we're going to hold the expo this year. We outgrew the hotel. There's no more room to pack in there. So we're going to do in the back of the football area, there's a big flat place. We're going to put all 50 of the expo booths. Probably the main stage will be back there. We're going to have a stage inside the lobby, all kinds of cool stuff. Of course, SiriusXM will be broadcasting live both days as always. So now we can have like 5,000 people show up and we have plenty of room because this place is 100,000 square foot. So that's the big thing for the expo on Sunday. We're going to get a lot of support this year from the Hall of Fame Village, the museum. Everything's going to be top notch as it always is. And these boys are ready. These folks are ready to throw a party. I think they finally picked up that this is probably a cool thing to do.
I find it funny that we had like a room with the exhibits the one year. Then we got kicked down to the parking garage to set up for the next year.
Needed more room.
And now we're into a stadium now for the third year. So
yeah,
I mean, that just gives people an idea how much this is growing. Just kind of talk about the people, the numbers from like year 1 to last year. Because I imagine this year's even going to be bigger than what last year was. I don't know what you got the numbers already, if that's projecting out to be higher.
Yeah, so our first year was quietly done in 2019. We had 30 booths, but we only had about 75 people attend. Okay, it was nice. It went well. Everybody was happy. And then, of course, this little thing called COVID came around, and we didn't do anything in 2020. And then 2021 came, and everybody wanted to get out of the house. So 500 people showed up in year 2. Last year then was our third year, which was 750. And this year we're expecting to exceed, we assume we'll exceed 1,000 or more.
Well, I'll tell you what, that year So year 2 was one heck of a trip trying to get across and back across the border.
Exactly. As I
Right
said,
there.
the fact you even made it out of Canada was impressive.
Yeah, you know what? Getting out of Canada wasn't the problem. It was them letting me back in. I think they thought they got rid of me finally. When it
They're
was all
smart. They were like, let's get this guy. We got him out. Let's keep him out here. Let's do it.
They literally canceled my flight from Cleveland to Toronto, and they like sent me from Cleveland to Washington to Montreal to Toronto down to Calgary.
That's a smart government.
This year's even gonna be crazier because I'm like literally going to Newfoundland the 2nd to the 9th. I come home the 9th, so I'm home on the 10th, and then I'm flying back across the country just to get down there and get a piggyback from Bob Long. So I'm looking forward to that. But you talk about one of the biggest things that brings a lot of people in is not just the exhibits, but the stages and the different panels that we have. Can you share some of these panels right now? Like we had an IDP panel last year. We obviously had some other ones. I'm waiting for the Colin the Lefty to come up there and warm up on the main stage there with you this year. But what do you guys got going on?
Yeah, I mean, pretty similar to last year. I mean, every type of, IDP, Dynasty, Devy, redrafts, auctions, best ball, sports betting, prop bets, women in fantasy one, which was a huge success last year. And we're going to move those ladies to the big stage this year. And hopefully, Terry, you come in, you can be a part of that as well. We'd love to have you. That's kind of the goal, is just keep, bringing folks in. We'll have some new breakout sessions. We got some new companies coming in, showing off their products or their brands. So it's going to be just as fun as last year. We will have, again, four panels going all at the same time. They'll all be recorded so that you can watch them after the fact, in case you missed one or you can't decide on between the two to go to. And yeah, it'll be, expert mock draft, the big pregame event with, the big names like, Marcus Grant and Andy Behrens and Bob Harris and Fabiano and all those guys will be on stage as
Matt
well.
Donnelly. So, yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, I love where your head's going with that. Even I cracked myself up. We gotta get that. We gotta get the cookout group in there somehow too. While we're
We're already talking about that as well.
Well, I mean, what more? How much more consistency can go into the Expo? I mean, you're going to get quality talent all the way across the board, no matter what panel you go into. And it's kind of like the wide receiver position when it comes to fantasy. Turning our attention back to the fantasy football guide, that's a great transition right there, Major. What do you got for us here off the get-go?
Absolutely great transition. We did a show a couple weeks ago, and Matt and I were just talking about receivers, and there's so many receivers. Like, how difficult was it for you to like kind of rank these guys when you get down into the weeds? But talk to us about how hard it was to rank these receivers because there's so many, and then 2, we'll just hop right into Jamar Chase.
Yeah, you're right. It is, and as I went through them this year and saw, I mean, you see the consistency numbers of and this kind of all finally kind of made sense to me, as well as we have seen this transition from what used to be 9 running backs in the first round to now 9 wide receivers going in the first round. And the consistency numbers show you exactly why. If you look at the running back position, there was only 5 over 75%. But when you look at the running back position or the wide receiver position, I think there's 13 or 14. So big difference. I think that's why when I put this together, I was looking at it as, okay, who am I going to draft if I'm in these spots? Because you kind of have to look at it that way. Like, I'm number 1, who am I picking? Am I taking Chase or am I taking Jefferson? And again, it's just like the other ones were, right? Josh Allen versus Patrick Mahomes, or, McCaffrey versus Eckler. You're splitting hairs. I went Chase just because Chase was 12 for 12. He was 100% perfectly consistent in the games he played. So even after he got hurt and came back, he still maintained that consistency. And Jefferson was only 76% consistent. Now, that's not terrible, but that ranks 12th amongst all wide receivers last year, even though he was first in total points. And if any of you out there had Jefferson on your team and made it to the finals, you know what I'm talking about, because that 2.5 fantasy points crushed us all. My heart bled for a week. I was like, I almost couldn't even mention the name Justin Jefferson, because I was so excited to be going to waltz through this finals, and he scores 2.5 points and I lost by like 5. And I'm like, this guy just does anything normal, I'm winning. And I lost like $700 or something. It was very upsetting.
Oof.
Real
So,
quick,
That is
before
painful.
before we get to the next one, like how many 100%ers did you have on there? How many guys said 100? Is it just Chase?
Just Chase. Yeah, no,
Nice.
100% is extremely rare. The only wide receivers that I know have done it in the history of me doing this is Antonio Brown did it 2 years in a row. DeAndre Hopkins did it once. Now Chase is 12 for 12. So yeah, he's 100%, but he didn't play all 16 or 17 games.
Right.
But I think it's just those two. And like I said, Brown did it 2 years in a row, straight 2 years in a row. So he had 24 straight clutch games in his peak. And it's very rare. Kelsey was 100% last year at tight end. 100% is extremely rare. It really is. So, yeah. So even getting that close at 12 for 12 is still pretty impressive.
So I love this, especially with, talking about the wide receiver 2 and Justin Jefferson, because the other day I was in a nice little Reddit debate with someone around the inconsistency of Devontae Adams. And you've literally just like this perfectly outlines my entire thoughts around it. A lot of people pick and choose the inconsistencies that they want to see because Devontae Adams had the exact same inconsistencies of Justin Jefferson, and literally down to the exact 76% rate here.
Right.
It's perfect.
17, exactly.
It's perfect. So yeah, it's funny because Justin Jefferson, he's my wide receiver 1, but if you're taking him, you're accepting, maybe it'll change now, with the addition of, maybe a full year of Hawkinson, and, if Addison gets in there and draws, some defensive attention. But you are going to take a few lumps there when defenses decide that, hey, I'm okay with just locking down Justin Jefferson. And that's 100% cool. Everybody else is going to have to beat us. So that, that does happen. So, it makes sense to me. Jamar Chase was, having him as number 1 was just by far the most consistent. I think Cooper Kupp maybe was second there in terms of, I think maybe his last injury game kind of knocked him there. Out of that. But yeah, Justin Jefferson, let's talk about him, wide receiver 2, because he is the, the apple of everybody's eye, really.
He is the apple of everybody's eye, but again, everybody doesn't see, unless you had him in the finals. But it wasn't just the finals. I mean, he obviously missed 4 games that he was under 11 points. For me to pick anybody first overall or even in the top 5, I'm going to have to be really comfortable. And in fact, if I'm picking second and Chase goes first, I might pivot and do McCaffrey or something. I don't know. I mean, I'm really concerned because here's the other thing I'm concerned about is now they lost Adam Thielen and they've got either KJ Osborne or Jordan Addison as a rookie. What's going to stop teams now from double, triple teaming Jefferson and then they saw what Jair Alexander did to him in that week 16 game. I'm not knocking him all the way down to, past number 2. I still think he's that talented and they're going to get him the ball. He's still going to get, 15 targets or 20 targets a game because that's what Kirk Cousins is going to do. But I'm just a little concerned when you're the lone wolf out there versus a Jamar Chase who has Higgins and Tyler Boyd and all these people, to throw to if he's covered. I'm a little worried about Jefferson. Not enough to move him past second yet, but I still don't know how comfortable I'm going to be if I'm sitting early 1, 2, 3 in a draft and go, do I want Jefferson? Do I feel that comfortable, or am I going to go and take McCaffrey or Eckler? So.
Yeah.
And we got to forget, he's also getting protected in that lineup by one Irv Smith Jr. now, too. So,
Right.
I mean, we got to feel much better about Jamar Chase. Number 3 on your list kind of surprises me, but it really shouldn't when you look at the numbers. Number 2 last year, when we're talking about consistency, 15 of those clutch type games last year, 88%, which was the second highest or third highest, I guess. I don't want to give away maybe a sleeper a little bit later, but it was the third highest of the wide receiver position. And it's a guy that maybe we don't think about as being consistent because he's so explosive. And that's Tyreek Hill. He had a lot of up and down type weeks when he was with Kansas City because of how that Chiefs offense worked. But with Tua on there, Tua Tagovailoa and the Miami Dolphins, he was pretty much the definition of consistent throughout the entire season. So when you look at this number 3 versus your number 4, I'm not going to give away number 4 yet. What gave Tyreek Hill the edge?
Well, I think it's just that speed. And the fact that Mike McDaniels in Miami knows how to use him. I mean, that was the key, because let's be honest, Tua missed a lot of games and was knocked out a lot of games. So they had a Teddy Bridgewater as the backup, who basically, you throw him a 3-yard slant and he goes 77 yards for a touchdown. Guess what? It's awesome. And I think that's just what makes Tyreek Hill is every time he touches the ball, whether he's running an end around or, quick out or whatever the case, with bubble screen, he's got the potential to make a lot of yards. And with Jalen Waddle on the other side, they can't double team him like they. So the quarterback situation is still up in the air. I hope they find somebody better than Skylar Thompson to be the backup. That would be nice. So I'd feel much more comfortable with him at third if Tua is 100% healthy, or they've got somebody better than Skylar Thompson. But
they do have the Jets starting quarterback from last season, Mike White, there now.
Well, there's always that. Yes.
At least now he'll air it out.
But speaking of the quarterbacks, though, like, how does a quarterback affect the receiver in your rankings? Does that play a factor at all before I get into the next one?
I mean, there's certainly very good, there's certainly some good receivers out there that have had some marginal quarterbacks and, really didn't break out until they moved, to a different team. Most of the top guys, when you look at the guys on these lists, AJ Brown, Stephon Diggs, Cooper Kupp, Lamb, Devontae is probably the only one right now that I'm a little worried about, mostly because we don't know if Garoppolo is going to be 100% healthy. Now who are we looking at as their backup? So, as things get closer, you shouldn't take the quarterback shouldn't have that much, but it's enough, like a Michael Pittman, like how, if you just had somebody you felt comfortable with. If Minshew was going to be definitely the starting quarterback for sure, then I might feel more comfortable with Pittman. But right now, and I've seen his ADP starting to drop too. So we can all love Anthony Richardson all day for his feet, but if you want to draft Michael Pittman, we need him to do more than just run.
Exactly. And talk to me about Cooper Kupp. A lot of people have him ranked 1, and him being the only target out here in LA. I'm pretty sure like he's going to get a lot of targets. So talk about what kept him from being number 1.
Just because the team around him is still kind of old. I'll just call a spade here.
Right.
Will Stafford stay healthy all year? Is Van Jefferson enough at number 2 to take the pressure off? Is Cam Akers going to be good enough at the running back position? There's just their defense or their offensive line was terrible last year, and I don't know if it's gotten much better. So there's just a lot of question marks around him. Cooper Kupp is Cooper Kupp, and if he stays healthy, he's going to be top 10 for sure. Is he going to be number 1? Maybe, but
right.
Boy, I just feel like kind of like the Justin Jefferson thing is like, is there enough around him to keep the defenses honest? And I'm not 100% sure there is.
Let's talk about my the next guy. This is the guy I'm personally invested in, and I think it's interesting how you've got him ranked here, AJ Brown, especially because people obviously think super highly of Devonta Smith, and you clearly do too. If we look, a little bit, shortly further down the rankings. But AJ Brown is an interesting player to kind of take into account with consistency because overall it was a fantastic year, but for some reason he gets knocked kind of maybe he gets knocked as not having that kind of Tyreek Hill, the Cooper Kupp kind of upside, yet he performed extremely well. And then you've also got to factor in Devonta Smith, who came on very strong there in the back half of the season. How do you handle particularly with AJ Brown, 2 players that are ranked so highly?
Yeah, we've seen this multiple times over years, right? It can be done. We've seen certainly teams that have had 2 very good receivers and ranked in the top 20 that were on the same team. It certainly can be done, and if anybody can do it, Jalen Hurts and the Eagles and that coaching staff and that offensive line gives them all the reason in the world. Now you've got rid of Miles Sanders. I think you're going to throw the ball more because you're going to rely on either a often injured Rashad Penny or DeAndre Swift, who is good catching the ball out of the backfield, but not necessarily a good runner. So I feel like AJ Brown, and the amazing thing to me is, like you said, people are kind of down on him. He's like wide receiver 8, pick 15. Is that what I had? Wide receiver 9, pick 17. Mm-hmm. So he's going in round 2. So you can literally pick. I could pick, like Tyreek Hill or Justin Jefferson or Jamar Chase, and maybe get AJ Brown in round 2. Like I literally would you'd just hear the screams from Canton, Ohio. I couldn't be any more excited. So yeah, and his last 8 games last year, he was 100% consistent. So he by the time when he really started clicking with Jalen Hurts, started out a little slow, not terribly slow. But last 8 games, 100% consistency. I'll take him in round 2 every day, all day.
Well, Bob, I think I'm pretty much sure I'm not going to be the Jim Brown division when it comes to the Kings Classic, because I've got your strategy figured out right now. There's no way I can, in good conscience, let you get Tyreek Hill and AJ Brown in the first 2 rounds. So
it's going to happen.
Pick your poison, man.
So if you are maybe you go heavy running back, maybe you go Christian McCaffrey, follow that with Nick Chubb, who's going much later, late second round. Nick Chubb, we're seeing him go in drafts. Who's that wide receiver? Who's the last wide receiver maybe that you're looking at? You know what? This guy could be a wide receiver 1 this season and is maybe not getting drafted. We know that AJ Brown, Diggs, Lamb, Adams, St. Brown, these guys are all going to go in the first 2 rounds. I mean, that's kind of where they're already going. And then we get a little bit of an interesting mix of where these next group of wide receivers go in rounds 3 and 4. So maybe you punt wide receiver till round 4. Who's that guy that you feel comfortable being your wide receiver 1? Because when I look at where your rankings are and looking at the consistency from last season, especially that clutch rate, there seems to be a guy that is just standing out at me that we're forgetting once again, Tara. This is one of the guys we continuously forget about each and every year. Is it Keenan Allen? I mean, is he that guy that we're like, this guy's still a wide receiver 1, and we're not talking about him as a wide receiver 1. You've got Justin Herbert as a top 4 quarterback. That means you've got to have a number 1 wide receiver there. And then the second question on the wide receiver position, because this is one of those hot topics on Twitter, Calvin Ridley over Christian Kirk. I mean, we look at a lot of rankings and they kind of go back and forth here and there, but you've made a pretty
I made a statement.
Yeah, there's definitely a statement here when you have Calvin Ridley versus Christian Kirk. So kind of maybe talk about maybe that wide receiver 1 that you can get a little bit later. Maybe that's Keenan Allen, maybe it's somebody else, but then kind of talk about that Calvin Ridley statement that you made.
Yeah, well, so Keenan Allen, love Keenan Allen, as you said, 90% consistent last year before he got hurt. So he comes back healthy. Now he is on the wrong side of 30. That's definitely a thing. But what I'm hoping is, as Major had mentioned earlier, is the addition of Quentin Johnson now gives them 3 top receivers. And by having them all in the field, and if a Kellen Moore is coming in here to implement more passing, then now nobody can, and Keenan Allen is definitely Justin Herbert's favorite. He's definitely that, third down and 6, he's going to get his 7 yards. And at the end of the day, he's going to have 6 catches for 70 yards. And guess what? That's a clutch game. And you can get him probably as your maybe wide receiver 3, 2 at the worst, 3 maybe, depending on if, people kind of forget about the fact that he's an old man and, or they do remember he's an old man, let him slide. So yeah, I love Keenan Allen. But yeah, Calvin Ridley's on my undervalue wide receivers in the guide. And it's because his ADP is wide receiver 26. There's no reason that the Jacksonville Jaguars went out and got this guy to come on this team to not be the number 1 receiver. Christian Kirk is very good. I get that. But if you have Ridley on the other side and he's doing what he did just a few years ago in Atlanta with Matt Ryan at quarterback, yeah, this is going to be a fun time. And I've done a couple best ball drafts, and I've gotten Ridley as my wide receiver 2 or 3. Wow. Because people are just like, oh, well, Christian Kirk. What? Christian Kirk is okay. Yeah, I know they paid him a lot of money, and he did very well because he was the number 1 guy in that offense because Doug Peterson came in and made it that way. but there's no reason they went out and got Ridley not to make him the number one guy. I think it helps Kirk a little bit, maybe, and that's why I have Kirk ranked as, a wide receiver 3. I think he's still got the ability to be a solid receiver, but Ridley's going to get a ton of targets. ETN, they've got Tank Bigsby, but they're not out there to run the ball. They're out there to throw the ball with Lawrence at the hand, which is why I have Lawrence actually pretty high in my quarterback rankings too. I think I have him ahead of Lamar Jackson. So yeah, I'm all in on that team.
Them's almost fighting words. I'm still a big Christian Kirk stan there. I think I've got him at wide receiver 19. I think I got Calvin Ridley at 21. So, I've got them right beside each other when it comes to fantasy. I love this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. I think it's going to be fantastic for fantasy. But Major is one of those guys that always gives us crap for having Bijan Robinson so high because he hasn't done anything yet, right? He hasn't even stepped foot on a football field, but at least he played football last year. We know that Calvin Ridley can separate. That's one of the good things he's done, but we haven't seen him in a year. Look at what happened to Deshaun Watson after missing a year. Are you worried about maybe a little rust coming in there, or are you willing to bet on Calvin Ridley?
I was going to use that same term. I was going to say, I'll bet you he'll be pretty good. But yeah, no,
yeah,
he's 27, 28 years old. I guarantee you he's staying in shape. He knows what he's got going ahead of him. And let's be honest, if he can go out and have a big year, he might get a decent sized contract to sign either with the Jaguars or go elsewhere. He's certainly not a young chicken anymore. He's like I said, he's 26, 27. So he's up there. But he also hasn't played in a year. So the wheels are still a little strong. I think he goes out there and he's got a chip on his shoulder. He wants to prove that he's not done. I think he's going to go out and kick some ass. I'm happy to have him on my team, especially as my wide receiver 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Well, we could transition here to the tight end position because it's technically part of fantasy football. We're not too heavy on tight ends. It's really been a wasteland for fantasy. So when you look at the top 5, it's really no shocker here. I'm looking at the numbers, looking at the name, Kelsey, Andrews. Nobody's going to debate those two being number 1 and number 2. Consistency, they are what they are. Even in a bad year, Mark Andrews would have still been, with his numbers last year, a down year, he would still have been the wide receiver 25 if he played wide receiver with those numbers. Mm-hmm. So we know what we're getting there. But what I think it gets interesting is from tight end 3 down and how you want to rank it, because you got a Goddard, Hawkinson, and then Kittle, which means Pitts and Waller are on the outside looking in for fantasy, which, a lot of people are scared on Pitts. No one's going to debate the talent of the kid. Right. Mm-hmm. But we are going to definitely debate the fact that he hasn't been used or he lived up his potential. And he had a good rookie year. Tight ends don't get 1,000 yards receiving in their rookie seasons. And he did that. He just couldn't get the touchdowns. And then last year, he just couldn't get on the field. So we know why we have issues with Kyle Pitts. Darren Waller last year was dealing with the injuries, and now he should be the number 1 target there for the New York Giants. So this whole tight end position is going to be weird. But I don't want to talk about these 5, 6, 7 guys. I want to know, because every year we have seen this from Robert Tonyan to Dalton Schultz. We've always seen Logan Thomas comes to mind as another tight end. Someone comes up every year from the tight end position like a phoenix rising from the ashes and gives you a season that we are not expecting. Is there maybe an undervalued tight end here, or maybe a tight end that, because I know Tara likes to punt the tight end position, who is a tight end that she can target a little bit later if she misses out on these first 7 tight ends?
Okay, so let's go with that one first. So I won't mention his name. I'm going to say he was ranked 6th in total points, 11th in consistency. So that means he's top 12 in both. He's first 5 games last year with a healthy quarterback. He was 100% consistent. And his name is Tyler Higbee. And right now, his ADP is tight end 15, pick 136. Now, let's move forward to this year. You've got Cooper Kupp. You've got Van Jefferson at number 2. Higbee's kind of the third option, maybe the second option. And if you looked at those games, if you look at the stats from those first 5 games last year when Stafford was on the field with him, he got targeted all the time. I mean, 8-10 targets a game. He wasn't, he was catching 6 balls for 50 yards, but that's 11 points from a guy that most people aren't even. I think I was doing a best ball draft, and I think I got him in like round 15. And so, if you're going to punt, at least get somebody that might be semi-productive. So that's my guy.
He's
The guy
burned me too many times on that. I can't do it. He's burned me every season since like
And he's
been
a
in the league.
jerk.
Oh yeah, maybe. I don't even know that part. He's burned me every season he's been in the league.
Matt versus Tyler Higby.
Yeah.
Right.
The guy that I think has the potential to come out of nowhere, and you actually mentioned a little bit earlier, Matt, is Irv Smith.
I like that.
He goes to the Bengals, which we know is one of the top offenses. This kid's never really gotten a chance. Mostly because he was hurt, so he's got to stay healthy. That's number one. So if he can, last year Hurts missed 4 games, and if he would have played in all 17 games, Hayden Hurst last year would have been in the top 12 in points.
Okay.
This kid's much younger, much faster, better team, has the opportunity to really prove what he can do. And so, his ADP is like tight in 27. So again, if you want to punt, grab Higbee and Irv Smith like in the late rounds, and one of those two I think has potential, if not both, to be fairly productive for you. So that's my kind of breakout, right, Phoenix from the ashes kind of thing. I'm going to go with Irv Smith.
Is there any more targets left for him in that offense though? You think he has enough targets to be productive?
I think so, because it seems like, when teams have pretty good defensive backs, they can still only cover 3 of them. And so that's when we saw Hayden Hurst kind of break out quite a bit, especially teams that, if you look, like I remember watching when Hayden Hurst last year when they were playing against a team that was in the bottom 10 or most fantasy points given up to tight ends, like there was a bad defense against tight ends. They always seem to focus on Hayden Hurst, and that's where he had his most points scored. He's not going to be super consistent, but if he catches 1 touchdown a game, I mean, when you only have to score 8 points to enter a clutch game, and you catch 1 pass for 10 yards and a touchdown, guess what? There's your 8 points. So, even if he catches 2 or 3 balls, catches a touchdown every once in a while, I think he's definitely going to be better than a tight end 27. I have him ranked currently at 17. That's my guy.
Yeah, you're preaching to the choir here. I'm a Irv Smith, well-known Irv Smith truther over here. But I think it comes down to what you were saying too. I think the volume won't be incredibly consistent, but the opportunity in terms of the red zone, and we did have a limited sample size that 1 year where he did get a little sliver of opportunity. I think that's 2nd year maybe, but yeah, he has that capability to be able to do that. And it's a good, he's got that, he can be that guy for Joe Burrow.
I almost see him. Yeah, I almost see him being like Dawson Knox from 2 years ago. Yeah, he'll be top 12 because of touchdowns, pass catches, but most of the touchdowns. I can see him being the Dawson Knox from 2 years ago.
All I know, when Joe Burrow's talking to his tight ends, he's like, "Baby, I got your money, because you follow that money." CJ Uzomah, he turned in 60-plus targets into a $24 million deal with the New York Jets. Then Hayden Hurst turned his 68 targets into a $21.75 million deal with the Carolina Panthers. Nice. You want to get paid? Go be a tight end in a Joe Burrow-led offense. It's that simple, and it's time for Irv Smith and all of his truthers. We can finally step up again. I mean, we've had some rough years here. We've had some really rough years going out there and touting him each and every year. I've got video evidence of Tara talking about him just a couple of years ago on this Vipers network itself. So, I mean, we love to hear that. And, Bob, we love having you on the show, talking consistency, talking about the fantasy football, and talking about the NFL Hall of Fame, because you're going to be giving a guy a little bit of a ride there once again, because you are now, I think, the longest standing chaperone to the Hall of Fame ceremony. So
third. I'm third highest.
That's the
one behind my buddy. Yeah. So I'm 34 years. Somebody's at 36 and somebody's at 38. So I'm driving DeMarcus Ware this year. I'm very excited.
Nice.
So what's that like? How does that feel? Like, I mean, you're just driving, but you're not just driving. There's a little bit of chatter going on there. I mean, you can't share the
a couple years ago.
About,
yeah, a couple years ago, I had John Lynch, and let me tell you how much I drilled that man about information. And if Matt, you remember this, I got inside scoop on how well Deebo Samuel was doing. So this was 2 years ago, and versus Ayuk, and a lot of people were all over Ayuk that year, and not Deebo. And I just, random, hey, tell me about Deebo and Ayuk this year heading into the season. He's like, he said, Deebo is just crushing it in camps. He is just so way ahead. Ayuk is really struggling, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, that's all he said. And so I told everybody at the Expo that year when we were doing the expert mock drafts, because I drafted Deebo, and, he ended up like third in total points that year and had a great year. So I really like Samuel and Deebo a lot. But, yeah, I've tried to get some inside scoops. That's for sure.
Yeah. So the key to that whole conversation there is he drafted Deebo, then told everybody, not tell everybody.
Yeah. So I drafted him and I said, oh, by the way.
Right.
So maybe we'll get some Cowboy scoopage here after the draft. I mean, all of a sudden, if Bob's starting to draft Cowboys in the first couple rounds, I mean, I think something's up there, and we should all kind of expect.
I'll be drafting Tony Pollard. I like him.
I mean, you can't go wrong. I mean, he's basically a guarantee in the second round. You have to take Pollard in the second round nowadays, right? That's basically how it goes. He's, I believe, one of Tara's breakout performers there. You can catch her latest video over on 4 for 4 there, Doc, on their YouTube channel. She dropped that just recently. Bob, once again, I mean, is there anything else you want to kind of plug? We've been talking about the Expo. I mean, you missed the the early bird gets the worm, the early bird special's off, but you can still get your tickets. And I tell everyone out there, go get your tickets. It's well worth it, because in that ticket package, it's going to pay for itself right there. You get so much, not just these cool little T-shirts, but you get so much more going there. Not just the party passes, but you get all kinds of different
ticket to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. That's $40 alone.
Exactly. I mean, that's like an automatic thing you have to do when you go to Canton, right? We got to automatically go down there. By the way, I got to get a bunch of different food places from you this year when I go down, because I basically lived on the DoubleTree chocolate chip cookies the entire time I was down there. Not that that's a bad thing.
I'm about to say, you're over it now or what? You've been talking them up for years now.
This should not be just on a cookie diet.
No, yeah.
On that package.
So the package, like you said, includes admission to both parties, a ticket to the Expo itself on Sunday, a ticket to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. You get the T-shirt, you get the swag bag, which has like $300 worth of coupons from all the various sites in it. So it's like a $200 value for like $75-85. Now it's $85. So yeah, it's a pretty good deal.
I don't. That sounds like a lot of free added in there. Anything free is worth saving up for. So make sure you catch that there. Head over to the Fantasy Football Expo, August 11th to the 13th, 14th.
Yep, August 11th through the 13th, and the website is just thefantasyfootballexpo.com.
There you go. That's it for today's show. For Tara, for Major, for Bob Long, I'm Matt Donnelly, and this has been the Dynasty Vipers Vipercast. See you next week.